So welcome to another Wargame review from theplayers8.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're doing one of our first impressions of Sword of Rome from GMT Games. So this is a big multiplayer point-to-point movement wargame. It's certainly Conquest of Italy, so it's ancients, right? It's Sword of Rome. It's Rome.
Yep.
Good gracious. This was designed by Ray Farrell.
Guy that did Time of Crisis and...
Which is also amazing.
Yep.
But this is a game we've had on the shelf for a few years.
I bought this at Origins a couple of years ago. Probably 4 years ago?
Was it 2019? I think so.
Yep. So 4 years ago, found it, had wanted it because I enjoy games on Rome. I do enjoy point-to-point movement. I enjoy CDGs. We had played Time of Crisis, and I was like, "This is a really good game." So Ray Farrell made this one. I'm sure it's great. So yeah, I'd had this on my shelf. I think I clipped it over COVID. I mean, literally, I think I had got it out, clipped it, and was all excited about it. And finally, 4 years later, we got around to playing it.
Yeah. So this is a game we've taken to a few conventions, being like, "Oh, maybe we'll be able to get it to go," and it just like never happened.
Yeah.
And then a few months before Buckeye Game Fest. A friend of ours, Bill Simone, had mentioned that he had he had learned to play it, and that he'd played it a few times. And I was like, "Please, will you teach us? We'll bring it, and we'll bring people to play."
And Bill, to his credit, came very prepared.
Yes.
In fact, we have a couple of extra player aids that he kind of developed and designed to help us play the game. And excellent teach. And actually, I think once we got into it, I'm like, "Oh, well, why are we so intimidated by this? It's not really that difficult."
It's not, but there's a lot of exceptions.
There is.
And so it was also...
And there's a lot of asymmetry.
Yes. So we played this at Buckeye Game Fest. 5 of us sat down. And so this has the 5-player... This is the second printing. It's got the 5-player expansion, got the mounted map board in it. I played as the Carthaginians, funnily enough.
I was the Etruscans and Samnites.
Yeah.
Which was a very weird pairing, I thought. Etruscans were a little more...
I don't know.
I think they were a little more civilized, and then the Samnites were a little more barbarian style. Didn't build cities, but that's who I was. Russ played
He was the Greeks.
The Greeks. Charlie played the Romans, and then Bill played the Gauls.
Yes.
Basically. So...
Yeah.
And true to form, you and I were extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
You came ravaging through southern Italy.
I was trying to dominate the whole of Sicily was my goal.
And I blitzed up into Gaul and took 2 victory point areas and...
So this was...
Crazy.
This is kind of our first impressions, because we've only played it once. It was also a big learning game.
Well, we really only played, I think, 3 turns.
Yes.
And it was... I don't want to say it was over, but I know I needed 1 more victory point to win. Now, I was going to be the target of everything.
Yes.
But we decided, okay, lots of mistakes were made.
Yeah.
Lots of strategic mistakes were made.
And it's not like, oh, mistakes were made, and it was like everyone apart from Bill on the other side of the map was new, and so there were things that were done that's like, oh, anyone with experience would never do that because of what it does to the game.
Yep.
So it was kind of like a lot of stuff that was happening wouldn't happen in a regular game just because of our newness to it.
Yeah.
And not like, oh, but that's the game. It was kind of like silly stuff that was going on.
Sure.
And so understand that having learned this, we are going to be playing this again, and you'll see like a full review, and I'll be more confident in teaching you how to play it. You're not going to see that today, though, unfortunately. But
it's really, I would not say it's an overly complex game. I think I said that earlier. There are some exceptions, right?
Yeah, and the asymmetry is such that everyone has their own stuff. And so teaching that is a pretty big kind of task.
Sure.
So huge thanks to Bill for teaching us how to play this.
Did a great job.
Great job. And again, he'd mocked up a 2-page sequence of play with all sub-steps in it.
Very helpful.
Mocked up play aids with everyone's unique stuff on them. It was really, really nice. So huge credit to Bill. Thank you very much for that. But playing this, was a very interesting experience because this game is Cutthroat.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the most cutthroat
Very
games.
mean-spirited cards.
Everything is like, hey, you get to do an amazing thing, which just, you can roll someone over. Or like, this is a take that card.
Yeah.
Like, everything is so vicious, and everyone is so on top of each other immediately.
Oh, yeah.
This is a check your feelings at the door kind of a game.
Multiple people are on top of each other
Yeah.
from the get-go. I mean, my two factions were sandwiched in between the Gauls, the Romans, the Greeks, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to get massacred. And I didn't. I decided to go massacre people.
That's it. The only way to not get massacred is to do the massacre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played as the Carthaginians, and it was interesting because we were kind of like talking to people about this on social media and different places, and people were like, oh, it's much better at 4 players. Everyone said that.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting, and me like playing as the Carthaginians as the game went on, my understanding of those sentiments grew.
Right.
I still had a blast playing it.
Oh, no
enjoyable
doubt.
time doing it. But there was like, the Carthaginians are this tiny little corner of the map, and I'm here to like fight the Greeks to give them something to do.
Yeah.
But then like half the stuff that the Carthaginian player is supposed to do is fight some off-map rebels
in North
and,
Africa.
So I'm like, half the stuff I'm doing is not interacting with the rest of the game, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'm fine doing that, but I can understand how people would be like, that's not very fulfilling.
Sure.
I still had a blast because we're all at the table yelling and screaming at each other, but
Yeah.
I would be interested to play it at 4-player to see what that looks like.
I would too. And at 4-player, basically the Carthaginians become an inactive power that you can activate.
Yeah, they're like a
with
neutral
cards.
power, basically.
So that I can't remember what the ones that would vex the Gauls were called, but trans something.
They were the Alpine Gaul.
So you can activate the Transalpine, you can activate the Carthaginians, and there was one other to activate.
The guys, I don't remember what they're called, but there was
Yeah,
a
they're
stack
little
of them
tribes.
run by Rome.
Yeah. So it's cool. The other 4 factions then ultimately fight against each other and those 3 threats. But it's a card-driven game. And those cards, as you mentioned, are very mean-spirited.
Yes.
And let's give an example. So one of the cards that I pulled out early on was get into a combat and basically catapult the leader of the enemy army into the sea. Now, I didn't say that, but it was like, he doesn't affect the combat in any way, shape, or form. He doesn't add to the attack. He doesn't add to the die rolling. He doesn't get to do any interceptions, blah, blah, nothing. And it was like, I did that, and Bill was like, huh. And his leader was really good. I think his leader was a 3 leader. And all of a sudden, my little Sam Knight force was pretty tough because my leader was a 2, and I had more guys than him. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this is going to be, and I crushed him, right?
Yeah.
So very mean-spirited like that. There's other things that are even meaner.
Yeah, well, and because you can just like sit, I'm on the other side of the board, and I could like activate these neutral guys over there.
So they attack you.
Just to screw you over.
Yeah.
Like,
and you've got to be doing that.
Yes.
That's the way the game's designed.
Or like, I remember Russ, I killed all of his leaders. But then, like, Russ spent one of his...
Yes, that was...
There's, like, emergency cards, I don't know what they're called. He, like, spent this to get an extra turn.
What are those called? Go ahead, keep talking.
And so out of turn, he, like, was able to get Pyrrhus of the Pyrrhic victory.
Yep.
Stick him on a big army. Then he got to take his regular turn. And then... Desperate Times,
yeah.
And then he, like, launched an attack at me to try to take back a city I'd taken off of him. And so he's, like, finally had a friggin' army with a good leader. And he was a really good leader. And then here's me, Mr. Little Reaction card, who had my, like, slingers that kill your leader. And it was like, it's not just like, oh, I catapulted your leader into the sea. You've just used one of your only 2 Desperate Measures cards in the whole game. So that was like a whole extra turn resource that you had, and your whole regular turn to activate Pyrrhus to go on this campaign.
Yeah.
And then he got catapulted into the sea.
Yeah.
And then he lost the combat and everyone died.
Yep.
And it was like, oh, this is bad.
So you got to watch out. Those cards can be very, very wicked.
And
very wicked.
And everyone's like cards are targeted to the people they should be interacting with, right?
Yeah.
I don't got nothing that affects the Gauls up north.
I had stuff that affected the Romans, the Gauls, and the Greeks.
Like a lot
That's
of my
who I
stuff was targeting the Greeks because
Yep.
I'm basically there, or like doing some naval stuff, which
Yeah.
was fun that I could do. But it is a vicious game. You can never really predict the outcomes of combats because even if you have a huge advantage, you're going to get a bunch of modifiers to your combat, which means you're probably going to win the combat, but you still got to roll 3d6. And
3d6.
And the values that you roll, you're going to add your modifier to see if you win or not. But the values on each individual dice, those correspond to what the losses you'll actually inflict versus the losses you'll take from what the defender rolls.
Yeah.
So we saw armies where they would win a combat, but they would inflict no losses, as opposed to the defender who would lose and they would inflict 3 losses.
Yeah.
And your armies aren't that big. You're going to have a stack
you have 4 or 5,
4, 5, 6,
maybe 6.
But a lot of the times it's 3 or 4.
And it's very hard to get. You get reinforcements at the end of every turn.
But turns are very long.
Turns are very long. Or you can spend a 3 ops card to build 1 reinforcement.
Which is incredibly expensive.
And I think I did that
that
once because I really needed a unit over there. But the other thing that I thought was very interesting, very siege-heavy game.
Yes.
Right? You have cities. You have to move into position to siege them. And a siege is a multi-step process depending on what size the city is. A phase 1 city, you have to be successful on 1. A phase 3 city, you need to be successful on 3 opportunities. That can be really challenging. And if you fail and you have to go home at the end, guess what? That siege is over.
Or if someone dies and you now don't have enough to carry on the siege, you're like...
Right. Very interesting. I thought the combat... The 3d6 was what really surprised me.
It was really neat.
3d6 gives you such a huge range of possibility.
Yes.
1d6, you can... Okay, I'm going to get this. 3d6, we saw 17s and 18s rolled. We saw 4s and 5s total rolled.
What I like about multiple dice rolls is that if you have a d6 or if you have anything up to a d20, like a single die roll, your odds are a flat line. Whereas when you have multiple dice, you have a bell curve, which means you get much more average distribution of result, which is interesting. It's a bit more predictable.
Yeah.
But in this game, this reminded me a little bit of like a Richard Berg game. And you could see his influence on this design. It was the combat chart. You have this chance of victory table. So the little chance of victory tells you like,
what percentage are you going to win? If
whatever your net modifier is that you get from this.
This is a 35% victory combat.
Hey, this is a
what
terrible combat. You shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But if you have good odds, like the odds table is fascinating.
and that was I thought one of my favorite parts of the combat system. So like let's say one army had 3 units and another army had 2. That's just a +1. Right?
Yeah, 3 to 2 sized army, right?
Seems
nearly even.
Now, move up to a 5 to 2, only 2 points more in an army, all of a sudden you're at +6. That's insane.
And
that is insane. But you got to think about that.
Or if 3 to 2, you get a +1 modifier. If you can get 3 to 1, it's a +6 modifier, right? The sizes and the differential between the armies. Incredibly interesting to play around with.
Yeah.
And then you roll the 3d6, because you might have all those modifiers. You're going to win. You're going to force them to retreat. You might not do any losses.
Right. And you might take 3
feasible
losses.
that you might do nothing.
Yep.
And
fascinating.
And we watched it happen.
Yep.
It was such a cool... But that the force ratio modifier table and then the combat losses table, those steps and what they do they're totally different. But it reminded me of something like Genesis.
Yeah.
Where it's not just like, hey, what's our ratio? And roll a 2d6. I don't know. That's every other war game.
Yep.
This felt different. It felt like something that was more unique.
Well, but the combat losses results specifically are tied to the size of armies that are fighting, which is perfect.
Well,
but
it's just who wins and who loses.
Right, but then losses come about by rolls of 4s, 5s, or 6s, and the numbers of those that you have on those 3d6. That was fascinating. I remember thinking, dang, I just crushed you 19-7, but I didn't, or 15-7, but I had a +7, so I didn't roll any 4, 5s, and 6s.
Yeah, I rolled 3.
I did no losses.
I rolled 3 3s, but I had a
Crazy.
+10. I dominated you, but I didn't kill anyone.
I didn't kill it.
You just route.
Fascinating.
It's such a cool system.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game itself is quite, like, the way that the Carthaginians work, very different from the way that, like, the Gallic tribes work up north. Like, they're like, don't have cities, and they're going around doing these raids, and they're getting money from
trying to plunder. Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, I dominate the seas. Or I can move on every single one of my cards.
Sure.
And like, if anyone else wants to do a sea move, I have a card that says, no, you cannot do that.
Right.
And then the Etruscans could pay people off. They could just bribe people. You cannot attack me.
I never did that, but I had the threat of doing that every time.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. I almost used it on Rome one time.
And the Romans have their consoles that just
that was really
constantly change. That's what you would expect.
And it was so interesting because one of the reasons that we didn't play any further is the Roman player made a couple of moves that really put him out of position to do anything. I had held some cards over, and I went ahead and attacked one of his Roman cities, and I took it over. And it's like, all of a sudden you're like, I could imagine how Charlie felt. It's like, oh, crap.
Yes.
Because I literally, with like 3 units, walked in and destroyed his city because he was out of position and didn't have cards to move back. So it's such a cool game, and the way the cards work is so fascinating. I loved it.
Yes.
I absolutely loved the game. I didn't understand every aspect of it, but I loved it, and I want to play again. And I want to play with people that aren't as passive as well. I want to see Rome be out burning things down.
I would, or I would consider playing with the same group, so that we're all at the same experience level.
So next year we'll get those same 5 guys together.
Because that way, because if one person's played this a whole bunch, they're going to take advantage of you, as is their prerogative, and it will happen, right? Like, this is a game that you can nary afford to make a mistake. You will be punished.
Very punishing, yeah.
And
that's what I was trying to describe with the Rome. He just moved a couple spaces out of position, and it's like nothing he could do. And I just walked in.
Yeah.
And then he was trying to assault me up there, and there was nothing he could do because I had a 3
And it was a
value
similar
city.
thing from the Greeks. We've learned very quickly that their opening move should be to come and assault me on the end of Sicily.
Doubt.
Instead, he was doing something else, and
he also left too many units back. He should have brought some of those units up, but live and learn.
A lot of that kind of folded very quickly, and it was like, okay. Well, I think we all learned tactically a lot of things that happen, and then like, I thought I was in a decent position, and then like these rebels showed up back in Carthage, and I could not for the life of me clear them. Yeah. I bounced off of this little stack of 2 guys like 3 times. It was like, and then it was like, I'm not actually doing anything in the game. I'm just fighting my own guys in my own space, and it's like everyone else is having fun. It was, and so that's
the rest of us were having fun watching you bounce off those 2 little pitiful units.
But it was like, I'm not doing anything here,
right?
And so that was like, I understand why people say, hey, the 5 player's not that great. I can understand because the Carthage player just kind of does their own thing a little bit.
Right.
It was interesting to experience that. But
I enjoyed the game, had a good time with it. I'm glad that we played it. I'm glad that I ran a copy down. I think I paid $90 for it, so I overpaid. But it is out of print, and it's kind of hard to come by. But I'm glad I got it in. I think people do speak highly of the game, but they like it at 4 players.
Well, and I think it's a game that very quickly rewards multiple plays, right?
Sure.
So the people who love this play it a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the people who play it a lot end up loving it, right? Like I want to play more of this, and I know that I'm going to keep enjoying it.
Right.
Like it was really, really fun to play.
Yeah.
But it was like, I want to reset and start again. So that we're all on better footing and understand the game, like the game state more now that we know the rules better.
Losing Army must remove 2 CUs, man. That's brutal.
Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Great game, though. I really enjoyed it.
So yeah.
Another good multiplayer, card-driven
Yes.
game that we were able to play at a convention. Hard to get 5 guys together, but I'm glad we played this.
Yeah. So, Sword of Rome from GMT. Check this out if this is something you're interested in. If you can get a hold of a copy and you have a group that's kind of wants to dive in, or if you know someone who has a copy and willing to teach, because if they own it and play it, they will want to teach you. Give this a go.
Yeah. You won't regret it.
No. And I don't know exactly when, but you'll see more of this from us in the future. So I appreciate you very much for tuning in. This is Sword of Rome from GMT. I've been Alexander for theplayers8.com.
And I'm Grant.